Hello, welcome back to Trails into Reverie, Beyond the Reverie, with me SLJ RPG. Last episode we did another Hot Springs Paradise, a little tale about a soldier in Calvert in Longley and Reen's interaction with them, but today we do an unconventional student. Let's go. April, year 1208 of the Septian calendar. Amherst Academy is the most famous educational institution in the Calverdian capital of Edith. The name derives from an artist central to Calvert's democratic revolution 100 years ago now. This was also reflected in the goal of nurturing new talent and helping forge a brighter future for the new republic. The Academy placed great value on traditional education, of course, but also encouraged the perspectives of new cultures and values, attracting many an independent mind from across Zamoria. It was a storied place of learning that reflected the Republic's views as a whole. This story, for its part, begins not long after the Springtime Festival, held yearly to welcome the new student body. It was just another morning at the Academy, countless students shuffling through its grounds, when one of them in particular happened to draw an unusual amount of attention. The young lady had a long, soft violet hair, crowned with a black ribbon. Is that Wren? Her figure had been cut very respectably as she matured into a young woman of 17 years, and yet her face still had traces of girlhood days bygone. The beauty she was, she never failed to turn inquisitive heads as she strolled along. It is Wren, interesting. Older Wren, confirmed, Calvert Games, interesting. Her name was Wren Bright. She was a second-year student from Janus Royal Academy in Liberal, now studying at Aramis as part of an exchange program. She'd only just arrived in the spring. Wren's goal in attending was not to further her education. She had been considered highly gifted since she was a child, having already earned several doctorates in the past years past, and there was little more of a new academy could reasonably teach her. Her goal in reality was to use it as a front to operate freely in Calvert. It was hard to find one better than being a student. She already found the role relatively foolproof during her time at Genus. Even if there were limits to how much a student could get away with, society as a whole was soft on school children. To move freely would also require drawing as little attention as possible. She aimed to conduct herself as modestly as any elegant young lady who wished to remain unseen should during her time at Aramis. There was one very big problem with this plan. Good morning, Mrs. Bright.
Isn't she just gorgeous? Look, I see her. She's so beautiful, and everyone says she's just as smart too.
All she had to do was walk down the hall to be showered with greetings and whispers of envy and admiration. Her looks alone were already enough to make her the talk of the school, but after one of the teachers let it slip that she received a perfect score in her entrance exam, there was suddenly not a single person who didn't know her name. The other students cared not how much she wanted to avoid drawing attention. She was getting it whether she liked it or not. Naturally, not everyone was pleased with the booming popularity this transfer student had attained in less than a month. While most were busy fawning over Wren's arrival that morning, another group watched the charade unfold from the shadows, echoing audible tuts of displeasure. Wren had yet to be enrolled in any clubs, so as soon as the day's lesson had come to an end, she packed her belongings and stood to leave. A word, if I may, Miss Bright. It was a fellow classmate, surrounded by a small faction of students, clearly loyal to their King Bee. Certainly, though the instinct told her this was not going to be a conversation she wanted to have, she made an effort to pretend otherwise. She would not be provoked into behaving as anything but a mature, modest young lady. I've been wanting to get to know you better for some time now, you see, so I was wondering if you might join me for dinner this evening. The boy, Ronald Griffith, represented a gentlemanly smile. Wren was very much pleased to being asked out like this. It was very much used to being asked out like this, but never once did she accept. She always made up some excuse to turn them down. Today would be no different.
I'm ever so sorry. I'm afraid I have something urgent to take care of after school today. Some other time, perhaps.
This was usually enough to get them to give up, but Ronald was a persistent one. Well, that won't do. I have something very important to discuss with you. I've already booked us a table at a very fine restaurant so we could discuss in detail. Is there really no way your business can wait? There was something ominous about his smile. Ren couldn't help but be curious about what he was thinking.
I'm afraid I can't. I'm so sorry after you've gone out of your way to prepare some time ahead. Still, I could spare a little time now, so I'll be happy to talk here if that's alright.
So not tonight then. A pity. Ronald's tone read one of less genuine sadness, more of irritation that things were not going according to plan. Well, aware that he let slip his true feelings on the matter, he quickly composed himself and smiled. Now it's better than ever, I suppose. This does concern everyone in the room, so perhaps all's better said here. To this, Ren glanced around the room, noticing only she, Ronald, and his lackeys were all who remained. Most were likely on their way home or in their respective clubs. Whilst some would have ordinarily been in the classroom at this hour, she was certain none would wanted anything to do with Ronald and his group. He took a step toward her and then began to speak. I'm well aware, Miss Bride, that you have come all the way from distant Liberale to be here. It's not unusual for students to transfer from afar for family reasons, but I hear in your case you came to Carver just to learn in these hallowed halls. I cannot help but be deeply admired by your spirit and thirst for knowledge. Pure theatrics, this one. At the same time, I worry about you. Brilliant as you may be, living alone in a far-off land must be a terribly lonely and challenging affair. We all need someone to depend on in our lives, so that would be especially so in your situation. So, if you don't mind me saying so, Miss Bright, I believe you're in need of someone to look after you, to protect you. At least he shut up, giving Ren a chance to respond.
She scrutinized him closely. In short, you'd like for me to join your circle of friends, correct?
Ronald's smarmy smile broadened. His father was a senator in the Republic's parliament, meaning he held a significant amount of political power. His son used this to his full advantage ever since joining the academy. Ronald had used all of his father's name to form a faction of sort among the students, forcibly building his reputation until he was one leading candidate for student council president in the election staged in half a month's time. His goal, when assumed, was to bring the hottest talk of the academy into his faction to further secure his chances of victory. I think you'll find that joining us would help you feel much more secure and at home here. Or perhaps you don't yet appreciate just how much of a difference having someone like me backing you would make on the life of an exchange student. True, she mused inwardly. Being in a group of high social standing would make it easier for her to gather information. If she could leverage his father's connections to build more of her own, that would pay itself in dividends in the days to come. The pompous boy had no way of knowing the actual circumstances that brought her to Aramis, but his proposal was in fact very beneficial to her. She returned his smile with a modest one of her own as she answered,
You're kind to think so much of me, but I'm afraid I'll have to decline.
Clear, unambiguous rejection. Ronald's lips were still curled into a smile, but he could not hide the twitch in his brow, nor could his lackeys hide their shock. They had, by all accounts, expected her to answer the opposite. Are you sure you wouldn't reconsider, Miss Bright? Surely someone as brilliant as yourself can see why accepting my offer would be in your best interest. I fear if you don't know now, you may well come to regret it. The last words were a hair slower and deliberate to intimidate her. Ren, of course, was never going to fall for it.
I'll admit this is a tempting proposal, tempting enough to inspire one to consider helping a certain someone win the student council election. If only that someone weren't you.
What did you just say? The sudden taunt caught him completely off guard, resulting in a flare of irritation escaping him. Ren, for her part, was unruffled by the change.
I imagine you don't need me to explain why, but I will to be sure. I'm very aware that your threatening glares I always attract on the way to school every morning have been coming from all of you. They've been constant in my life ever since just before the festival.
All were flabbergasted by the statement, the silence confirming that she had what she said to be true. She continued,
Now, you have every right to regard me with caution, and when aware of how much I stand out despite my best efforts. Taking potential threats under your own wing is a strategically sound move too. However, that target was so easily able to see through your scheme shows everyone here just how inept you really are. I have better things to do than assist someone so incompetent and small-minded. With a shrug and a sigh in a somewhat dramatic fashion, Ren stood before Ronald, his shoulders trembling from rage. Good day to you all. Ren gave a courteous nod of acknowledgement before leaving the room, paying no mind to the wide eyes and open slack jaws she left behind. So Agate ended up getting pretty beat up from another one of Mom's crazy jobs she threw at him, but we did get some good data out of it, but your Mom is always so funny. The night in the dormitory, Ren and Tito were engrossed in deep conversation through their laptops. Oh, she's grown up too. It's always the same old with you. Surprised as anything if Agate left with how often you tell me she has him nearly facing death. You two are in a rut. I know something could spice things up. Maybe try adding a little romance to the mix of a couple bright-eyed lovebirds we know. There we go. But we have agreed to go somewhere next week, but we're not in a complete rut. Well, isn't that something? The stairs to adulthood await you, my dear friend. Ren. Tito graduated from the branch campus in Erebonia just as Ren had left for Calvert, leaving them no time to spend with one another in person. This wasn't ideal, of course, but from a hint of sadness came the habit of talking like this once a week so they could stay in each other's lives. They discussed anything from their new lives and environments to the fruits of their research, occasionally stumbling into a serious topic matter or two along the way. It sounds like a legal confrontation between the Vernon Company and Epstein Foundation is inevitable at this point. I know, I really can't believe this is happening. Both frowned at their screens. Recent development concerning the Calverdian industrial giant Vernon Company had become a key source of concern for them as of late. So these are the various different places. It began after Crossbell returned to normalcy after the Supreme Leader's takeover the previous year. Professor Erica Russell was approached by the Verne Company to propose that they join the Western Moria Tech Union, that she had been so hard at work forming. And to no one's surprise, they refused. Before Erica and the rest of the engineers involved would even finish getting ready to go and change Van's mind, something happened to make the Union the least of anyone's priorities. The independent development of a new generation of ordnance, the generations-long partner in this subset of technology, the Epstein Foundation would not be a collaborator. The latter had been key supporters of Zamoria's orbital development and novel technology in general since its very inception. Battle orbits were not an exception to this. The Foundation had known their way around them since the very first model, drafting the incredible concept that had been used as a base ever since. Even the Rhineford Company before the Battle of Jormungandr had not thought to develop their Arcus models on their own, instead of favouring to develop them in a partnership with the Storied Institute. The announcement was quite simply unprecedented, and it sent shockwaves through the industry. The Epstein Foundation was also less than pleased about being cast aside in this manner. While there were certainly legal concerns regarding who owned the patent to this technology, the greater concern was that their stable position in the industry as a whole was now becoming unstable. They initially responded by attempting to resolve this through peaceful means, but when those attempts were proved fruitless, it was reported that they were preparing for what could only be an ugly international legal dispute. I'd say Verne has the upper hand if this ever makes it to court. Unlike their previous Ramda augments, this 6th generation is designed to set a whole new standard. All of this main features are backed with new tech, with some features still being kept under wraps. I wonder what those are, what they could be trying to develop that's important enough to ruin their relationship with the Foundation. Though I have heard the government telling the Verne Company to focus more on weapons development, I have to. It sounds like they were planning significantly to revamp the military's weaponry. The official story is they're planning on slimming down the military down. If they're pairing this with the latest weapons development, then they're still just as powerful, maybe even more so. As part of the war's ceasefire agreement, Erebonia was required to downsize their military, bringing it more in line with other Calverts. Yet if the Republic were to expand the capability of its own military,
This recently found equilibrium in superpowers would quickly be broken. Whatever the truth may be, I've got a lot more questions I need answers to. Maybe it's worth visiting the Verne Company's headquarters in Basel at some point. That's named after somewhere in Switzerland. Anyway, you haven't learned anything about where the Professor Hamilton is at the moment, right? Nothing more concrete, at least. It sounds as if she's continuing her research eastward, but I haven't heard anything more specific than that. Mom and Grandpa haven't had any luck in contacting her either. I'm not surprised, since that area isn't very well connected, but it's still unfortunate. She's a lot more personable than Professor Smith, so having her on side would help a lot. Tita really began to laugh. Yeah, well, a lot of worrying stories going around about the PMCs and stuff like that. Tita could only laugh. Oh, it makes me wonder why none of this would even be happening if she was still acting as advisor for the Verne Company. The deeper into the conversation they went, the more Tita could feel her spirits sinking. The political climate in Western Samoria was unusually stable at the moment, with its nations basking in prosperity. But she could not shake off the feeling that this peace was built over rotting wood, that it all come crashing down with but the slightest provocation. This was becoming especially true in the tech world. I'm not sure what's going on with the writing here, but as it seemed to undergo rapid recent years compared to other fields. So rapid in fact that no one could possibly sustain its current sudden weight without cracks beginning to form. Try not to dwell too much on the worst case scenarios, Tita. This piece might rest on the knife's edge, but there's still plenty we can do to preserve it. That's why I'm here right now. That's also why you're working so hard too. We could find a million problems in the world if we wanted, but pessimism isn't going to make them go away, right? The world's filled Tita with the right amount of comfort she needed in that precise moment. Yeah, I guess you're right. Thanks, Ren. They continued losing track of time as they talked well into the night. Before they knew it, the clock had struck 12. Well, it's getting late, so I should probably be going. I'll talk to you soon, okay? Alright, good night, Tita. Tita suddenly remembered something. The exclamation stopped Ren just as she was about to end the call. San and Joshua told me to ask you if you're doing okay. Those two always worry too much. You'd think I wasn't talking to them too. She couldn't help but remember her interaction with Ronald after class, but Ren quickly drove up the thought from her mind. It wasn't worth dredging up. Tell them they can rest easy, everything is fine. I wanted to let them know if you were being bullied so they could fly over and help. Honestly, do you think I can keep myself safe from a few schoolyard bullies? Actually, they said they were more worried about what you do to them than what they'll do to you. It's very fair. At her friend's silence, Tita couldn't help but burst out laughing. I worry about you too, but they're probably right. How awful of you. Even if I were to happen to me, I wouldn't do half of what you're imagining. Not anymore, anyway. See, saying that is the kind of thing that makes people worry. I'm a lady now. I need the magnanimity to forgive the transgressions of others. I'm also trying to do what I can to avoid sending out too much. You can try, but I think that's always been a lost cause. Anyway, I'm really gonna go now before I remember anything else. Say hi to Zin for me if you run into him. Oh my god, is Zin gonna be in the new games? He must be. I plan to go see him with everything calms down here, so I've been meaning to go see someone else I've been indebted to in the past too. By the time the two of them had finished talking and ended the call, one day had given away to the next. The morning dawned of yet another school day. However, just as she had left her classroom in the main building at the start of lunch and went to descend the staircase, she felt someone suddenly draw near from behind her. Reflectively, she dodged out of the way. A female student entered the field of vision. She lost her balance, and her expression was a mix of fear and surprise. Give me 1 second, guys. And we're back. Right. So, the morning dawned yet another day at school. However, just as she left her classroom in the main building at the start of lunch and went to descend the staircase, she felt someone suddenly draw near from behind her. Reflectively, she dodged out of the way. A female student then entered the field of vision. She had lost her balance, her expression a mix of fear and surprise. She passed through the spot Ren had been moments before, but her momentum showed no sign of fading. Someone didn't stop her. She was going to start tumbling towards the stairs. Ren was quick to grab her and pull her close. She supported the girl's weight with one arm, and with all the grace of someone taking part in a ballroom dance, saving her from falling. Several students happened to witness the event unfold, could not help but elicit gasps of admiration. Noticing that the girl's eyes were still unfocused, Ren gently addressed her. "Are you alright? You aren't hurt, are you?" Finally realizing the situation she was in, the girl whose face had become quite red quickly straightened her posture in a fluster. "Yes, I'm okay. You're Ren Bright from the next class over, aren't you? Thank you so much for helping me." "You're very welcome. But I would have to caution you from losing your composure like that right next to the staircase. Do you really have some urgent business to take care of?" The girl first frowned in response, then paused to think, then answered, "Nothing I can think of. It's weird, even though I was probably my imagination. It felt like someone had pushed me from behind. Obviously no one here would do that, so I must have just bumped into someone by accident." She thanked her rescuer again before disappearing into the distance. The situation had deemed her imagination, however, and lingered in Ren's mind. If I hadn't said something was amiss, both of us would have fallen down the stairs. We could have been badly hurt. Or is it really just a coincidence? Or was it a deliberate action by someone who wants to hurt me? If it was the latter, she didn't have anything to support this theory, but it came with a familiar sensation. The feeling of malicious stares focusing on her from the shadows. It took surprisingly little time for her suspicions to gain evidence. After finishing gym class the next day, Ren made her way for the classroom, and began preparing for their next lesson. As she did, she immediately noticed something was amiss. All of her textbooks had been glued shut with an excessive amount of adhesive. Try as she could to open them, it was a lost cause to get every single paper. It was an obvious attempt to harass her. The culprits behind the attack were equally obvious. Not far from where Ren was sitting, Ronald Grith and his lackeys, whom she had memorably turned away 2 days prior, were snickering to themselves, their eyes mockingly focused on Ren all the while. They're not even interested in hiding what they're doing, what they're like anymore. At this point, they want me to know who did it to intimidate me. The latest development was also confirmed in her mind that they were responsible for trying to push her down the stairs the day before. What a beautiful sight they were. Because she refused to join their group, her existence was, in their eyes, now nothing more than a hindrance to Ronald's campaign for student council president. They would stop staring at nothing to either break her spirit or force her to join, or shame her into lowering her popularity amongst the student body. It doesn't matter that Ren had no interest in taking part in the election, and further inspecting the state of her textbooks, Ren's expression grew difficult to read. "I think I can make them usable again, but not in what little time I have left before class." The bell soon chimed to signal the start of her lesson. Ren left her textbooks out on top of her desk, making no effort to open them throughout. Her instructor was of course less than pleased by this perceived slight against them, picking her to answer a question as an attempt to chide her poor behaviour. "Miss Bride, please read the next paragraph aloud for us." Ronald and his friends had a series of pleased giggles at this time, their minds delighted at the thought of a flustered Ren being told off and humiliated in front of the entire class. Then what transpired in reality played out very differently from their fantasies. Without a beat, Ren did exactly as she was told, reciting the selected paragraph she had been asked to read word for word, all while her test book remained closed. "Did you memorize the entire book?" Even the instructor could not hide their surprise. But of course, a student of Aramis Academy, I would never dare to compromise in prepping for my lessons. Ren responded with such grace that she of course drew in more sighs and coos of admiration from both her instructor and peers alike. It was only Ronald and his posse who groaned with sullen expressions. The next instant came on Ren's way to school the next morning. She entered the school gates with the horde of other students. She was about to step into the building when she noticed a foul smell coming from above her. She looked up where a proportion of the fencing surrounding the building's rooftop was falling directly above her. Other students noticed at the same time, others letting out screams of horror and worries they could do nothing about. I could only get out of the way easily if I wanted, but the fencing was over 2 arc in length. She could have escaped unharmed, but the other students around her would likely not. There was a risk she was unwilling to take. Grasping the battle ornament in a bag, she cried out, "Airstrike!" The spear of wind formed in response to her incantation, flying upwards at high speeds. She carefully controlled the power, so instead of sending the fencing flying, it simply cancelled out its momentum instead, allowing it to hop and catch it with ease. This was no accident. The smell makes it obvious. The distinct scent of a liquid extracted from a certain plant monster. One of its properties was to imitate the natural corrosion of metals, resulting in its application in certain solvents. This made the fence falling a deliberate action of the perpetrator, who had been trying to disguise as an accident. With Ren having been the target of several malicious acts already, the culprit was once clear. Again, she would feel the presence of those familiar hateful stares pouring into her from the shadows. But again, as well, they were not the only ones with her eyes on her. Whoa, that was awesome. Did you see that? Is there anything she can do? Ren's quiet mediation was disrupted by a multitude of cheers and applause from all those around her. As if she were a performer just about to leave the stage, she gave an elegant bow in response. This would not be the last time she endured harassment from Ronald's group, but each and every single time they thought they had bested her, she would handle herself with exemplary skill, their efforts only serving to make her more popular. The state of affairs had continued for several more days before a seemingly out of patience Ronald summoned Ren from behind the school building after lessons were over for the day. He stood oppressively before her, his lackeys behind him, with the composure he attempted to feign before now replaced by plain, vile anger. What? Let me give it to you straight, Ren Bright. You are an eyesore. Even the gentlemanly air he'd impersonated before was gone. Really? Well, that's not a very polite thing to say to a classmate. Don't try to act cute and innocent. I put too much damn time and mirror into building my position at this academy. But who's always at the center of attention instead? It's you. It's always you. It's like you deliberately tried to sabotage my chances. That's the last thing I can afford right now. The more livid Ronald became, the more ruffled Ren was in turn. You're only sabotaging yourself by setting me up to succeed over and over again. You are aware of that, aren't you? He had not been forced to defend herself against him over and over again, but she had not received nearly as much attention. This being pointed out caused Ronald to return an audible tut of frustration. So I'm going to have to ask you to get off the stage for a while. Who cares about how it happens? But it's gone long enough. I'm going to have to ask you to step off the stage for a while. What do you mean? Ronald seemed to resent some of his initial call from when they first talked as he answered, I mean something very simple. You just won't come to school until the election is over. And if I refuse? Then to this hand raised in response, Saki stepped forward around her. The boys were unusually well built for their age, showing their hulking forms in hopes of intimidating her. Refusing is not an option. If you aren't going to oblige me willingly, well, we'll make sure you can come to school for a while. His lackeys cracked their knuckles dramatically to clarify their leader's intent. Well, that's not good. I think we both know that it would constitute a grave violation of the school's rules. Something about her inflection caused him to mistake her commentary as showing hint of fear, further fueling the desire to dominate the situation. No one's watching a place like this. Even if something did happen to see, my father is a politician. He can make you go away. If they don't willingly choose to ignore what they saw in defense of my position, that is. Everyone in this academy seems to already know their place, you see. Everyone except you. His smile was so unpleasant that a sigh escaped Ren. Oh, I think you're the one who doesn't know you're at their place. Don't want to be wrath with him after what Teeter said, but he needs to be taught a good heart lesson. Ronald continued on, oblivious to what was running through his apparent victim's mind. Now, do as I say. Slacky drew closer, ready to seize her. I'll keep it mild. We don't want to use this to hurt for them. Just enough to set them on the right track. Don't think Estella Joshua would object to that. But just as she was about to act... Stop this at once. A girl's shout heard from the direction of the school building. She was of course not shouting at Ren. And who are you? Ronald's face was visibly irritated. Though the girl appeared to be visibly nervous, she continued to stand her ground. Ooh, is this going to be a character introduction?
I don't mean to listen in, but I can help overhear what was happening. You can't go through with this. What are you doing is wrong.
The girl stepped forward so she was directly in front of Ren to protect her from her schoolyard bullies. As she did, the light, sleek, dazzling blonde hair that simmered much like sunshine above recognized her to be the first-year student who lived in the dormitory next to her own. They were close to one another. At most, they'd only exchanged polite greetings with one another as they passed each other in the hall. Jura seemed like a quiet, polite young woman with a good upbringing. However, not the type whose eyes would glow with resolve as she put her well-being on the line for someone else's. Ren was surprised by this, as was Ronald, though he was less than impressed. He never fathomed another student would dare to resist him. One thing he did sense was that her resistance was little more than a brave front. With excitement at the thought of stripping that front bare, he grew a sadistic smile and addressed her. "Is it now? Well, how unfortunate for me that I have to have you to show me the error of my ways. Ren can wait. You're a first year, I assume. I'm gonna need you to give you a lesson just how right and wrong works in our society." Upon his signal, his lackey shifted and surrounded their new target over Ren. She began to tremble as danger closed in on her, but still she did not move. "Don't you dare!" This time it was Ren who spoke up. "I'll give you what you want, so you don't dare touch her." "But, you sure about that?" She wasn't planning on that response, but Ronald was more than happy to have his win in any form. "Stay away from school for a while, so that's what you want, right? But then the experience of standing abroad has been rather tiring for me, so maybe I do need some rest." Ren's voice was gentle in an attempt to assuage the kind girl's concerns. Ronald, meanwhile, made no attempt to hide the joy he felt at victory, laughing heartily with all the glee of a spoiled child. "Good, now everyone knows their place here. There's no reason to harm you now that I've got what I want. Consider yourselves lucky that I've decided to let you go." Ronald turned away to leave his lackeys following suit. "Good day to you then, until we next meet. The school will be all mine." And then he was gone. The only girls left behind in the school building, the younger of the two looked at her senior with concern welling in her expression. "I really am alright. You're very kind. I really am alright, but you're very kind to worry." Ren's smile was one of genuine kindness. From then on, Ren did indeed stop coming to school, citing illness as the official reason behind her absence. The students gathered in the Academy's auditorium several days for the long-awaited student council election. Aramis Academy as a whole placed great importance on the autonomy of its students, and as such, the student council exercised an unusual amount of power. It weighed upon them a massive amount of responsibilities, such as being the sole planner for the Academy's festival, a symbol of celebration of spring in the capital. This, however, also led to the position of a major status symbol even long after graduation. All of this is why a number of students put their names forward to become student council president every year. Yet this year, a great majority of the most promising candidates dropped out under mysterious circumstances, leaving only Ronald and others associated with him on the ballot, who wouldn't exactly boast about winning by default. Ronald and his supporters sat in the rest area, chuckling among themselves at the whole affair. Perhaps his name wasn't the only one on the ballot, but none of the others had done any certifiable campaigning, meaning his election was positively assured. Eventually the time came for him to give his speech. It was a compelling one. He played the part of a respectable young gentleman as he delivered it, speaking with the same silver tongue he inherited well from his father. There were some moments where he felt to hide his arrogance, but no one else had been prepared a speech, so this is not the blow to his campaign it otherwise would have been. "Now, if you could turn your eyes to the screen." The screen he spoke of was at the back of the auditorium. Rather notable feature of the skill voting to have anywhere was installed several years prior for use in lectures and to display recreational films. Other nations had yet to indulge in such luxuries, showing just how far ahead Harvard was in its own technology. Films are here interesting. Up until then, the students had used it to display photographs during their speeches, but Ronald intended to take it a step further. He wanted to share a promotional video, not simply a makeshift self-produced one that might ordinarily be presented by an amateur, but rather a professional piece of work he had paid a considerable amount of mirror for. The quality was genuinely impressive. His victory was written in stone, but this, he knew, would cement it much more. Convinced it would serve as the perfect beginning to his ascension to the top of the social hierarchy, he started the video. The musical number played was rousing, fitting. What followed then was Ronald appearing on the screen. "So how much mirror do you want for supporting me? I can make it worth your while." What? The video was playing before was not the one he intended. Rather an inspirational show of what he could bring to the student body. It was a recording of him buying off one of his opponents just days before. Hushed whispers, confusion sprayed throughout the auditorium. The next clip played. "If you know what's good for you, you withdraw from candidacy right now. Well, the only thing you'll be is the president of a hospital bed." The next was an equally unexpected scene of Ronald intimidating another candidate into withdrawing from the race. As it continued, Ronald realized that what was going on. Someone had replaced his carefully prepared video with another. The initially hesitant whispers exploded into loud murmurs that he had to raise his voice over them in an attempt to quell the situation. "This is all a forgery. Someone is attempting to frame me." But just at this moment, as if waiting for his cries of denial, the girl's voice resounded from the auditorium's entrance. "I'm afraid this is all entirely genuine." Her voice rang out with a wonderful clarity, charming all those who had heard it. She ran her hand through her violet hair, flipped it back as she talked and walked slowly towards the stage. "Bribing, threats, blackmailing, threatening, even executing violence against others, and many other cases of bullying besides. You are guilty of every single count, Ronald Griffith." Before anyone could fully understand what was happening, the student was on stage staring Ronald down, all eyes transfixed upon this elegant figure. Indeed, without any effort, she had taken the air of a protagonist from an epic tale, making a long-awaited appearance. "Damn it, Renbright, must you insist on getting in my way at every turn?" He growled as though a sheet of sheer anger. In contrast, the recently absent N responded with brilliant composure. "You are one getting in the way of the fair running of this important election. Your countless crimes have made a mockery of the whole process." Ren turned to Ronald and the rest of the students. She continued to list his crimes along the still-running video. Some listed frowns, others sympathy, others complete silence. By the time she was finished, all were united in a single, overpowering emotion: anger. It brings me no joy to say this, but a fellow student, but I'm afraid it must be said. Ronald Griffiths, you do not deserve to even attend this prestigious academy, much less be the president of its student council. Similar censure from the students followed in rapid succession. "She's right. Stop ruining it. You've gone too far." Ren's accusation wasn't the only reason for their anger. The students of Aramis had long loathed Ronald's oppressive behaviour. They hadn't spoken out before because they were afraid of his father's power. Now they realised he could be stopped. Their anger had reached an explosive boiling point. Ronald suddenly found himself at the centre of a torrent of abuse. He looked to his lackeys for support, but even they refused to meet his case. It dawned on him just how fragile all he thought he was built was. Rage gave way in instant deep despair. Casting a glare of pure hatred towards Ren, Ronald hurriedly sprinted out of the auditorium. Only when he was completely out of sight did an air erupt with cheers of joy. In the end, the addressing of the aftermath of the election took long enough that by the time she had left for the gates, it was already evening. Yet even now, with how late it was, instead of walking her usual route, she stepped off a path and entered an entirely unoccupied park. "How did it work? No one's going to interrupt us here, so how about you come on out?" In response to her words, Ronald emerged before her for the first time since he ran away earlier in the day, with 10 or so companions in tow. These men weren't his usual lackeys, set vicious figures with dark expressions and gaudy clothing, clearly not students of the academy. More than likely they belonged to some local gang. You don't keep very good company outside of school now, do you? With how they're dressed up, I assume you must be off to a party or something? I'm gonna wipe that smug smirk right off that face for good, Renbright. My dazzling future in politics was guaranteed, but now you've gone and ruined everything. What am I supposed to say to my father now? That's your problem, not mine. Or are you so small a man that you can't own up to the consequences of your own mistakes? Not a second had passed between his outburst and the manner in which she snapped back, causing his temper to go twice as vile. That's it. I don't care what it takes. You're gonna pay for thinking you could cross me and get away with it. Have at her. There won't be any consequences for going too far. My father will see to that. The men sprung into motion upon Ronald's signal. What followed made them doubt their eyes. Ronald could not understand what had just unfolded before him. His eyes relayed the information well enough, but his mind rejected it completely. The second he ordered his new lackeys to attack, Renner produced a monstrously sized black and gold scythe from thin air. This in of itself was beyond comprehension, but it wasn't the last thing to do to be so. The scene was like a cat toying with a powerless cornered mouse. Except in this shocking case, Ren was the cat and his men were the mice. They surrounded her at first, and yet all took a single swing of her conjured weapon in case most of them... all it took was one single swing of her conjured weapon to cause them to collapse to the ground. In less than 10 seconds, their confidence had crumbled within their bodies. The mice made to scurry as fast as they could, but the cat gleefully gave chase. Even in moments where she had let a few think they had gotten away, and reverted to immediately close the gap between them. Words. It was only after she bored that she would knock them unconscious like the rest, that she would seek delight in their next hunt. Like heavy sacks of potatoes, the men fell one by one by one, till only Ren and Ronald were left. This can't be happening. The young man was struggling to come to terms with what he just witnessed, as Ren stretched her limbs like a bored child still gearing up to play. Amateurs, every single last one of them. I thought I could at least have a little fun. Oh, but don't you worry, I didn't actually slaughter any of them. She turned her gaze from the spectacle of her own creation to Ronald. Would you be open to giving me a little bit more entertainment, perhaps, Ronald? Ronald twitched in fear at the mention of his name. In this moment, she was now nothing more than a beast in human skin. Stay away from me. My father is in Parliament. Try anything on me and you'll regret it. Her response was an expression of pure pity before tossing what appeared to be a magazine at his feet. It's one of today's tabloids. You might find its contents relevant. What? At first he was baffled by the shift. The second he peeked at the cover, his face went pale. Representative Griffiths, suspected of crime and bribery, connections to organized crime, read the headline in giant punchy lettering. There's a whole special feature on your dearest daddy, complete with evidence. It mentions that the CID is going to be conducting an investigation as well, so this may be the last day you can say he's in Parliament. My condolences. No. So visceral was his shock at the news that the simple word was all he could master. Even then, Ren wasn't finished. So, now that he's been removed from the equation, I'll ask again, would you be open to giving me a little more entertainment? She edged closer and closer, scythe in hand, sadistic smile lacing her lips. Ronald tried to retreat in fear before tripping over a rock and falling hopelessly on his black side. All he could do was watch her as though she were the Grim Reaper, tears and snot streaming down his face. Be a doll and play with me, unless you'll understand why they used to call me the Angel of Slaughter. She raised her scythe above her head, ready to swing it downward before realizing what she'd said. A grown woman wouldn't play with dolls, though, would she? Here I thought I could be better, control my childish glee. She covered her mouth with a free hand, blushed with feminine modesty at her slip-up. None of this behavior is befitting the proper lady, she wanted to reflect. After composing herself, she turned her attention back to her prey, only to see he was already unconscious. Finished? As she left the park, a calm young man called out to her, I certainly am. Ren met eyes with a brown-skinned young man leaning covertly against one of the trees. It was safe to assume he had witnessed the entire affair unfold. Ooh, new characters. He glanced inside the park for a brief moment before speaking with a slight but genuine admiration. You really are something. In what way? In every way. Even I was more struck by the hacking abilities of the famous Kitty than the combat prowess of the infamous Angel of Slaughter. Still hard to believe you managed to find dirt on this big dad that easily. Ren's response was matter-of-fact, showing no sign of his praise had gone to her head.
Most people aren't as cautious about cybersecurity as they ought to be. Understandable with how new most people are to it. Of course, it wasn't nearly as easy as this was when you're dealing with the leading corporations and politicians at the top of the food chain.
You made it sound like you tried before.
Maybe I have.
Ren's smile was both cryptic and daring.
I'd be more than impressed with you. You were quick to write that piece that's scathing, while also finding me the exact proof I needed. I'm glad Grace introduced us.
Just doing my job. The man's name was Dingo, and he was a professional reporter for a tabloid. He was extremely capable of his job, very well connected, and held a reputation for never shying away from danger. After being introduced to one another by Grace Lynn, he and Ren had made a deal with one another just a few days prior. The terms were simple. Dingo would provide Ren with proof of Ronald's misdemeanors, and Ren would use her hacking abilities to provide evidence of his father's crimes. Both were now reaping the rewards of the other's success. I'll admit I did get some big help from my friend. He was not too pleased about being asked to look into a scummy politician's equally scummy son, but he pulled through.
Oh, you just have all kinds of connections, don't you?
She did sense something other than Dingo was acting on her behalf while she was out of school. But he wasn't sure who that someone was. This curious sensation regarding their identity remained as she continued the conversation.
You know, I'm surprised you didn't meet with any resistance in running that story.
This goes to show how big of a fan the government was of Griffith.
They left him alone because he didn't actively oppose the current president's party, but from the CID's perspective, this chance to take him down was just about as good as they were going to get.
That does sound like something Miss
Tato Masters over there would do, but I can't say I like the feeling of being used by her, but oh well.
Dingo made a curious observation. I wonder why you went to school late to get rid of a small fry like him. He really bother you that much? Ren glanced briefly down at Ronald, still collapsed on the ground of the park, before shrugging her shoulders dismissively.
Not in the least. I didn't intend for this to go as far as it did either. I only wanted to teach him enough of a lesson so he'd leave me alone, but...
It was then that the younger student who tried to save her came to mind.
I think students deserve as much better student council president than him.
She then let out a titter that was most refined. As Ren expected, the allegation led to Ronald's father to resign from the parliament, while he resigned from Aramis Academy. The group of students who exerted power over the student body with his backing vanished overnight, and as a result of bidding peace to return to the grounds for the first time in a long time. One thing, however, came from this that Ren had not expected in the least.
Here are the documents relating to the next month's budget.
The student council's now president accepted the documents from the blonde-haired first year in charge of general affairs, pursuing them straight away. After Ronald dashed from the auditorium on the day of the election, most of those in his group who had put down their name dropped out in a timely fashion. Voting still took place even then, but all at once, and said was done, nearly 70% of the votes were disqualified. That's because they were in favour of someone who had never put a name down on the ballot. Ren Bright. Aramis Academy was known for how little its staff interfered with the many liberties it gave its students, but this time the staff clearly concerned that the dissatisfaction with Ronald was going to present dire problems in the future. The Witches chose directly to negotiate with Ren, and in the face of such fervent demand, she reluctantly accepted the position of student council president. None of her duties posed a prayer challenge to her, and by accepting it she had completely and utterly failed her initial goal of avoiding attention.
I wonder if this is how Thor's Branch campus's first ever student council president felt when he was elected. I couldn't even believe it when Tita told me. Alright, it is what it is. I suppose I'll just have to make use of it as best I can.
I feel like the student's going to be someone in the future. Sunlight beamed into the student council room. The blonde-haired girl and two of her friends struggled with the new workload they were adjusting to. As Ren sat there, ears open to random talk and occasional grumble, a thought crossed her mind. She no end of real-world worries, the problems arising from the rapid technological development, the society's next move, the ominous winds of change blustering over Calvert. but despite all of those, she wanted to enjoy her simple time here while she could.
What say we get this work done so we can celebrate with a tea party,
The arrival of spring was now a distant memory, even if summer had yet to come. There was nothing particularly spectacular about this time. It was just another ordinarily beautiful bright afternoon. An unconventional student, the end. As there's going to be another one. So we're going to do Forward Sword in Hand next time. If you've enjoyed this, like and subscribe. I'll see you guys then.